Hi there, this is Terry Duncan with Cut, Color, and Create. I'm one of the Altenew educators, and if you're joining as a part of the watercolor video hop, thank you for joining me. I'm glad you're here. Or if you just jumped on looking for watercoloring techniques, I'm glad you're here too. What we're going to do today is learn the technique that I used while doing this card right here. Hopefully you can see that very well. Basically, what we're going to be doing is using watercolor brush markers. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And then I'll tell you how I put the card together. I wanted to share with you the products that I used for this card. The first one is Altenew's Tranquility Rose. That's the stamp that I use. And then I also, for the background, I use Altenew's Never Stop Dreaming embossing folder. It's gorgeous with the roses around the edges. And so in order to do this technique, what you need to do is heat emboss the flower images onto a piece of watercolor cardstock. Now, it's really hard. I don't know that you can even see because I've used white on this, but I've already heat embossed my my floral images. So that's what you'll need to do for this process. And then because it is so hard, even for me, it's hard to see where the flower is. I always like to use maybe the ink that's already on a brush. If that's not dark enough, then you can go ahead and put a little ink on your brush. But I like to just put down a little bit of color so it draws out the outlines that we need to stay in when we're watercoloring. So now hopefully that image comes to life for you in the video. So I've also got a green one here so I can do the leaves. That just makes it a little bit easier to see what you're working with. And then the next thing, I always like to give some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. I like to swatch, especially when you're working with watercolor. I like to swatch so that I have a good idea of what kind of color I'm going to be working with. So for this card today, I have selected these three colors for the flower: Ruby Red, Rouge, and Citrus Burst. Again, these are the Altenew brush markers. So this is what they look like. They come in sets. And these three are from the winter set. And then I've also chosen three greens. I've used, and I'm not sure that I even used the Mountain Mist. I think I'm just going to go with Emerald and Lagoon. They're also both from the winter collection. I'll just point out to you how beautiful all of them are. I just love these watercolor brush markers. They are my favorites. So that's the first little secret besides blending on so that you can see the outlines. So the only other product that you need for this technique is just a watercolor brush. So just one filled with water. So I'm going to start with a flower, and I've got, I failed to mention to you, this is just Canson watercolor paper, and it's dry. I'm not going to put anything on it. I'm just going to begin to paint with my watercolor brushes directly onto the cardstock. Another little hint is you always want to open the cover away from your project. I have learned that the hard way. So I'm just opening it over here, and you can see I did drip out some ink, so that was a good idea. I'm going to make sure that my brush isn't too loaded. And then I'm going to start where I want the darkest places to be in my flower. So just here in the center, I'm dabbing in that ruby red. And then I'm going to go with rouge for the majority of the rest of the flower. And again, I'm going to just wipe some of that color off and just brush it on. Right now, it's not looking too fantastic, but trust me, you'll love the results. And then just on the tips, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. This one is Citrus Burst. And I'm just going to rub it around the edges here, just kind of to give the look like sun is kissing the flower. So not a lot of it, but just enough to add some interest. And then the fun part, we're going to use our water brush. And I like to use a circular motion. I have the same problem with that brush. Fortunately, I didn't hold it over my project, but I'm just going to begin to swirl and see how the water activates the pigment. And you can, if you don't want it too much to carry over, you can wipe some of that color off on a piece of paper towel. You can see it's starting to lighten up as I'm running out of pigment and adding more water. And now as I get closer to the edges, I'm slowing down a little bit so I don't go over the edges like I did right there. And you can see it mixes in the yellow. And it creates a beautiful combination of colors. And I continue to wipe off pigment so that I can get a variation in the leaves. You can see it's getting very light down here. I might have to add a little more pigment to this leaf down here. And I'm not squeezing any water out. I'm just letting the brush do its work. And again, I'm using a circular motion to kind of move the pigment to where I want it to be. And it's as easy as that. Now, isn't that gorgeous? Now, I just clean my brush off onto my paper towel, and I'm going to go on to the greens. And I'm going to do the leaves just exactly the same way. I'll turn this back up here. And I am going to start with emerald. And I think I'll turn it this way. And I'm just going to run a line of that emerald up through along the vein. And I'm just going to scribble a couple little places in the center here. Then I'm going to come in with lagoon. And I'm just going to scribble just like we did with the flowers. I'm going to scribble around that emerald. And then again, I'm going to add some yellow in just to make it look like the sun has kissed these leaves. And you can add as much of this or as little as you care to do. And now I'm coming back with the water-filled brush. And again, I'm just using circular motions. Another way, I started with the darkest, but you can start with the lightest. And that gives you a completely different look. Both very pretty. I'm moving pretty fast, so I'm not doing a real good job of staying within the lines. But I kind of like that with watercolor too. one little hint is if you get too much pigment out there, you can always draw it back in with your brush. And again, wipe it off if you're getting too much on your brush. See how pretty that looks when the yellow mixes with the teal? Gorgeous leaf. Okay, going to go on to the next one. Same process. I'm going to start with the emerald first. Just draw in along the veins. This one I'm going to make a little bit darker. And now lagoon all around the edges. If you do happen to get the brush onto another color, you can always wipe it on your paper towel to clean it. And then come in with a little bit of yellow. And now my water brush again. This one I'm going to start with the yellow. Cleaning my brush as I go. See what happens when that pigment is activated by the water. May have gotten a little bit carried away with that dark, but I'm kind of digging the results. And just use circular motions to carry the pigment out wherever you want it. Again, if there are places that are too dark, you can always draw the color back. Clean my brush. Now, when you clean your water brush, you can squirt some of the water through it and dab it on a paper towel and it'll remove some of that color. Okay, my last leaf, this little tiny little round one, same process again. I'm going to start with the emerald. And I'm just going to follow the veins. And then I'm going to go with lagoon around to fill it in. Then yellow, which is the citrus burst around the edges. And again, I kind of like how it looks where you start with the yellow first. This one I had to kind of draw some of the teal up into the yellow. Now I'm going to bring in some of the emerald. I'm just going to dab a tiny bit more of the emerald on down here. Just so that the three leaves look like they match each other. And there you have it. That is our technique. As you can see, you get beautiful results with just a little bit of water and your watercolor brush markers. Now, what I have done to build my card, I'll put this up here so you can kind of compare. I have I cut a piece of metallic gold cardstock to A2 size, which is 4¼ by 5½. And I've attached that to a card base, an A2 size card base, with a glue runner. Then I've embossed the background, and I'll show you what you get. I'll try and, there we go. That's what you get when you use this beautiful embossing folder. Again, that's Never Stop Dreaming. And I like to spray my cardstock with a sprayer on both sides before I run it through. And this is the kind of result you get. I thought it would be pretty if you had roses back in behind it. I used a pearlized cardstock with my card, and I just attached that whole thing. I trimmed it down to 4 inches by 5¼ and I attached it again just using a glue runner. I did put quite a bit of glue runner on that to make sure that it laid flat. And then I did use the coordinating dies to cut out each of the floral images. I did pop up the rose with some foam tape, but I glued the leaves with liquid glue. I like to use Bearly Art craft glue. And then this is actually the sentiment that comes with the set. Here you can see down here. I just love the font with that. And I heat embossed that just on a piece of scrap left over from the embossing. And I used gold for that. You can kind of see the sheen when I tip that. And then I just fussy cut it out. And then you can see I've kind of doubled up my foam. There you go. I've doubled up my foam tape so that it kind of is even across the rows and the leaves, and put it down in the lower third so that you can enjoy the design. So that is my technique, watercoloring with watercolor brush markers. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me again. Check down below, and I'll have all of the products I use listed there for you so that you can link over to Altenew to find them. Thanks again for joining me, and have a great day.